It was almost midnight when two men in police uniforms started hammering on my front door like they were trying to rip it off the hinges. They were shouting my name, waving what looked like a warrant, and for a few terrifying seconds I honestly believed my life was about to collapse over an HOA dispute. I didn't know it yet, but that night was going to expose just how dangerous fake authority can be, and how fast it crumbles when it meets the real thing. I was sitting at my desk deep in code, the glow of my monitor lighting up the living room while the rest of the house slept. Deadlines have a way of turning time into a blur, and that night was no different. My wife Victoria had gone to bed hours earlier after another one of her late work calls. Lately she'd been getting a lot of those hushed conversations behind closed doors, serious tones, the kind of thing you don't interrupt unless you want to get snapped at. I figured it was just corporate stuff. Compliance, audits, boring but important. That's what she always said. Our neighborhood Maple Ridge Estates was supposed to be quiet. Cookie-cutter houses, trimmed lawns, people who waved but didn't pry. The kind of place where the loudest sound at night was a sprinkler clicking on too early. Drama wasn't part of the deal when we bought the house, especially not the kind that involved uniforms, badges, and men threatening to break down my door. The first knock came at 11:47 p.m. 3 sharp raps. Professional, almost polite. I paused my work, listened, then shrugged it off. Probably a neighbor with an emergency, I thought. Or someone at the wrong house. 5 minutes passed. I went back to debugging a stubborn block of code. Then the second knock came. This one wasn't polite. Bang, 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 bang. The whole house shook. Picture frames rattled. My coffee mug slid across the desk and tipped over, spilling cold coffee onto paperwork I suddenly didn't care about anymore. My heart jumped straight into my throat. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate, aggressive, the kind of knocking that makes your pulse spike before your brain catches up. Police opened the door. "We have a warrant." That voice carried a weight to it, the kind that makes you feel guilty even when you know you've done nothing wrong. I walked to the door on shaky legs and leaned toward the peephole. Two men stood under the porch light, faces half in shadow, uniforms dark and official-looking. Badges gleamed on their chests. One of them held up paperwork, angling it toward the door like a weapon. Before I could even process what was happening, the knocking escalated again, louder, faster, relentless. Final warning. Open this door now or we will force entry. Across the street, lights flicked on. Curtains shifted. I could already feel the humiliation creeping in the knowledge that my neighbors were watching this unfold, assuming I must have done something terrible to deserve a midnight visit from the police. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the deadbolt, leaving the security chain on. I cracked the door just enough to speak through it. "What is this about?" I asked, my voice coming out weaker than I wanted. The taller one leaned closer. His name tag read Smith. Cold eyes, military posture. The kind of guy who looked like he enjoyed being in charge. "You've been notified multiple times about serious violations of community safety standards," he said. "We're here to execute a compliance warrant." His partner Harris held up the papers again. Stamps, letterhead, dense legal language designed to overwhelm, not explain. "Homeowners Association enforcement action," Harris added. "Authorized for immediate inspection." HOA. That word hit me harder than any threat they'd made so far. Because suddenly it all made sense, and made no sense at all. HOA disputes didn't involve midnight raids. They didn't involve police uniforms or warrants, at least not real ones. And yet everything about these two men screamed authority. The uniforms looked right, the gear looked right, the tone, the confidence, it was all there. I felt small, cornered, like a normal guy who'd somehow wandered into a world of power he didn't understand. And that's exactly how Mark Peterson wanted me to feel. 3 weeks earlier, Peterson had been elected HOA president. He'd run on promises of restoring order and protecting property values. I'd barely paid attention at the time. HOA presidents came and went. Most of them just liked hearing themselves talk at monthly meetings. Peterson was different. Within days of taking office, fines tripled. New violations appeared out of nowhere. Suddenly, everything was a problem. My first notice came in the mail, certified like I'd committed a crime. $750 for painting my fence the wrong shade of gray. I stood in my yard staring at that fence for a long time after reading the letter. It was gray. The approved colors listed in the handbook included gray. The difference was so subtle my colorblind neighbor couldn't tell them apart. When I called the HOA office, Peterson answered personally. "New protocols," he said, his voice smooth and smug. "Absolute adherence is required." When I pushed back, cited the handbook, he chuckled. Actually chuckled. "Failure to comply will result in escalated action." That was his favorite phrase. Escalated action. I wasn't the only one. Mrs. Evelyn Collins, who'd lived here since the houses were built, got fined for sunflowers that were allegedly too tall. Mr. Washington down the street had people showing up late at night, measuring where his trash cans sat. Measuring. With rulers. At midnight. It was harassment, plain and simple. But it was wrapped in legal-sounding language and HOA letterhead, which made it harder to fight. Easier to doubt yourself. That doubt ate at me more than the anger. I started asking myself if I was overreacting, if it was easier to just pay comply, keep my head down. That's how they get you. They don't have to be right. They just have to make resistance feel exhausting. Peterson took it further at the next HOA meeting. He stood at the podium like a general addressing troops and announced he'd hired a professional oversight team from a company called Metro Security Solutions. The name alone sounded official. Impressive. Until I looked them up. No real address. A website that looked like it had been slapped together in a weekend. Stock photos. Fake testimonials. No licenses listed anywhere. When residents asked questions, Peterson brushed them off. "They're highly trained," he said. "They get results where traditional methods fail." That sentence sent a chill down my spine. Around the same time, Victoria started asking questions. Specific ones. About Peterson. About the letters. About the supposed authority behind them. I thought she was just being supportive, using her corporate brain to help me think things through. She took photos of the notices, said it was for documentation. I didn't realize she was building a case. The surveillance started a few days later. A black sedan parked across from my house every morning. 2 men inside. Sunglasses. Radios. They'd sit there for hours. When I tried to photograph the plate, they drove off. Mrs. Collins said she'd seen the same car outside her house the week before. Peterson called me that night. "You ignored the deadline," he said, barely hiding his excitement. "Emergency protocols are now active." "What protocols?" I demanded. "You'll see," he said, and hung up. That was the moment I broke. I sat on my couch, staring at the wall, wondering how a simple disagreement over a fence had turned into this. I felt stupid. Powerless. Like maybe I should have just paid the fine and moved on. Maybe I'd pushed too hard. Maybe this was my fault. I even thought about apologizing, about giving Peterson what he wanted just to make it stop. That's what scares me the most looking back. Not the threats, not the uniforms, but how close I came to surrendering my dignity just to feel safe again. Then came the knocking. Back at the door, Smith was still talking, still threatening, still acting like he owned my house. "Sir, step away from the door," he said. "This will go much easier if you cooperate." I was about to cave. I could feel it. I was exhausted, scared, embarrassed. My brain was screaming that resistance would only make things worse. That's when I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. Slow, steady, deliberate. Smith noticed too. His eyes flicked past me up toward the hallway. Harris stopped recording for half a second. Victoria appeared at the top of the stairs. She wasn't half asleep. She wasn't confused. She wasn't wearing pajamas. She was calm, focused, hair pulled back, and pinned to her chest was a badge that caught the light and made the entire room feel different. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice cold and professional. "I'm Deputy U.S. Marshal Victoria Brooks. I need to see your credentials. Now." The effect was instant. Smith froze mid-gesture like someone had unplugged him. Harris's face drained of color. The air changed. You could feel it. Real authority has weight, and they felt it crushing down on them. This is HOA business," Smith stammered. Victoria stepped closer. "HOA business does not involve impersonating law enforcement. Those badges are fake." She named the statute. The penalties, prison time. No yelling, no threats, just facts. Harris cracked first. "Peterson hired us," he blurted out. "He said it was legal." Victoria radioed it in. Real radio, real dispatch. Within minutes, sirens filled the street. Neighbors came out, phones raised. Mrs. Collins pointed at the men and shouted that they'd threatened her too. By sunrise, Peterson was in handcuffs. Watching him stand there in a bathrobe, stripped of all his bluster, was surreal. The man who'd terrorized the neighborhood with fake power suddenly had none at all. And in that moment, I realized something that still sticks with me. Authority doesn't come from uniforms or titles or how loudly you knock on someone's door. It comes from truth, and the moment fake power meets the real thing, it collapses instantly.